everyone, welcome to SciTalk at SMC. Today we are in conversation with Professor Vidita Vaidya from Tata Institute of Fundamental Research, Mumbai. Her work focuses on studying the neurocircuits and how they regulate emotions. She studies the effect of neurotransmitters on their function as well as how these circuits change in the event of a psychiatric disorder like depression. For her work, she has received various awards. Some of them include the Shanti Swarup Bhatnagar Puraskar, the Nature Mentorship Award in Sciences, as well as the National Bioscience Award for Career Development. Thank you for being with us today.
My pleasure.
Let's start from the very beginning. Did you always feel like becoming a scientist when you grew up?
No, as a kid, I don't think I was thinking scientist. I first wanted to be a pediatrician because my pediatrician was very cool and never hurt me when she was giving me injections or whenever. And there was always something like a nice treat waiting at the end of the entire thing where I would either be given a chocolate or a lollipop. Then after that, I went through this phase where I wanted to be an archaeologist, which is just, I don't know why. I mean, there was the idea of sort of digging and, finding out things about the past seemed to be quite fascinating.
Yeah, in a way it is related to research somewhere.
Correct,
So
correct. After that, it was just that I mean, for me, I think I can think of one event which really impressed me a lot. There was this couple, the Shankles, and they had come to our institute to give a talk. And very often, if these talks were more general, sort of layperson talks, even the children from the colony could go, not just the
Right.
adults. So we used to go, and for us, it was a big deal because it was in an auditorium which had an air conditioning. And in the 70s, nobody had air conditioners in their own houses. And many of these talks, some of them I found interesting, some of them I found boring. But this talk was fascinating because the two of them had, they used to study sort of aggressive behavior of hippopotamuses. And they had taken lots of videos of their travels in Africa. So I remember as a child just looking at these videos and thinking, my God, people can actually do such a cool job for a living, right? Like they actually get to do this every day. Like their office is going to the safari. And so I was very impressed with that.
No, that's definitely interesting. So did you have any favorite teachers in sciences, like who influenced you in your early school days or college days?
Parents and my uncle, I mean, I had good science teachers in school, but they stuck to the syllabus. Whereas
Right.
at home with my mother and father, and I have an uncle who's a molecular biologist. So with these three people, there was no limit to just asking only this much. You could ask the next question. And then if they didn't know the answer, they would say, we don't know, which I really liked because very rarely in school would somebody say, we don't know. That we don't know was very cool. I mean, we really don't know. Nobody knows.
So your interest in neuroscience, when did it start developing? In your college days or even in school?
Animal behavior I liked by the time I was like 13, 14, 15. I thought it was very interesting. I was reading about Jane Goodall at that point in time. And I loved watching some of the David Attenborough series, which we used to have limited access to. But when we had access, I would love to watch it, I mean, in that this is pre-90s India, no? You have to imagine it as 80s India. There was barely any television. So for me, it was going to the library, the British Council Library, borrowing books. I didn't know that to study animal behavior, you can also study it from the perspective of understanding the brain. That didn't, occur to me till a little later, like a few years, right into, I think, round about my 12th standard, I started wondering, I definitely like this field and I know I don't want to do medicine. So that had become clear in my mind by the time I finished. But what exactly I wanted to do was also not so clear. I knew I wanted to do biology. And, I liked the brain, but I didn't know anything about neuroscience. So then I decided I want to go to Xavier's to do life sciences because it seemed like the broadest degree, right? You can explore so many things. By the time I was into the middle of my PhD, my bachelor's, I knew I wanted to do neuroscience. We had already done 2 basic courses which Dr. Sheila Donde, who's a stellar teacher, had taught us. And, I really enjoyed my neuroscience classes. So by then, it started appealing to me sufficiently that I said, okay, I think I want to do neuroscience.
So your days at Yale and even the postdoc, both of these are actually like Western universities, really renowned Western universities. Did you feel like their work culture or their education system in general is different from the Indian system? And what all would you say, we can borrow from them to make ours better?
I think it is different. I think they are more comfortable with declaring they don't know something in college and 11th and 12th, and even my bachelor's. The quantum of knowledge seemed to be more important than the way I thought about a problem. Whereas that was the biggest difference I noticed, that it was not how much I remembered, but how I approached an idea that started to be something that was much more appreciated. And that was like an unlearning and relearning for me, because writing the exams that I had to write there, I took a few undergrad courses when I went to do my PhD because I hadn't done enough neuroscience. It's like cultural shift, mental shift. I had to really shift how I was preparing for exams, or a lot of viva, like a lot more presentation than I was used to. And I was struck by the fact that the approach mattered, right? So that was a
Right.
difference that I felt. I think it's beginning to emerge. I mean, definitely in
Yes.
many undergrad
Okay.
campuses in India, it's there now.
So when you came back to India and started setting up your own lab, how has this journey been so far?
It's been a ride. So I started my lab in 2000, and there wasn't even an animal house facility really to speak of. So the first things were to actually hire a veterinarian, then to set up the animal facility, for which we had to get animals. Now, where do you get animals from? So we had to fly some animals in from Bangalore, and the rest we got from Hafkin. And some of these were actually things that I did with my first sets of students. So I very clearly remember going in my car, which was a Maruti 800, that old Maruti 800. I drove to Hafkin and we bought 8 rats, 4 males and 4
Wow.
females from them. But then we were bringing them back. We weren't sure where to put them, whether to put them in the back seat of the car. We decided to put it in the dicky. And then we were worried that if we put it in the dicky, there won't be enough air, right? So we had to tie up the dicky with just a rope and leave it kind of open. We were driving slowly, and a taxi driver comes up next to us and said, "Madam, आपको पता है कि डिक्की में चूहे हैं?" So the absurdity of these moments are many during setting up the lab, right? I think that's
Right.
the sort of, there is definitely an element of the unexpected. You can feel like, oh my God, I have so many things to set up and there's so many things to do, that you get overwhelmed. If you start finding it also entertaining, and I mean, my student and I had a good laugh in the car about it. This taxi driver having this conversation with us, and we're like, yeah, we actually do know that there are rats and mice in the back of the so you have these kind of,
Wonderful.
so these weird experiences. But overall, I mean, I set up my lab in a hut. It's a barrack style hutment, and the
Wow.
lab is actually called the Hutment Lab. I mean, 20 years later, we're still a barracks like structure, and I would love to have a better lab, but this has its own charm and character and personality. And of course, I don't find it so wonderful when there's monsoon and dripping of water. But rest of the time, I'm overall taken with the fact that we do have this wonderful space, so beautiful, close to the sea, where we can do our science. So yeah, overall, it's been a good journey, I would say. Yeah.
Yes, and I'm sure that working with students and developing your own experience of mentorship has been an exceptional journey. Just last year, you were a recipient of the Nature's Mentor Award. What is your take on mentorship?
I would say for me, it was pay it forward. I had phenomenal mentors in my PhD. My PhD advisor, Ron Duman, who passed away just last year, and his very close friend and colleague, Professor Eric Nestler, shared a joint lab when I joined their lab. They were perhaps in their early 40s, just 41, 42, and they just set up their lab. And I was amongst the first batch of students that they had,
Wow.
right? And it was a wonderful environment. And I think part of it is when you feel you're valued for yourself, not for what you produce. Science is not predictable, where you're going to guarantee a result is going to be a particular way and then going to result in a manuscript. Many times you may have worked for 2 years and nothing pans out, right? But if you feel that your mentor values you and values your intellectual approach to the problem, values the way you approach and think about science, then independent of the productivity, you feel that you matter. And I think that's something I learned from them hugely. that every student in my lab, no matter whether they're going through a up phase or a down phase, they matter. And that's
Right.
the primary sort of focus. And if you keep that, I feel, as center, you will tide through the rocky patches that automatically and inevitably come in science. You can't help those. But if you have each other's back, so and it's mutual. I mean, mentoring is something I cherish. I have really enjoyed all the students I've worked with. Every single one of them has been an asset to my lab, and I have learned much from every one of them. And I've been very lucky to work with some amazing people over the last 20 years. So that's something that I will say that of any recognition, this was the most precious, because this is something that I got nominated for by my own students. And so it is the most precious, right? It's in some sense a validation of something I watched as a young student myself.
So, as a mentor, what do you feel are the important characteristics or important qualities in a researcher, and how do you try to develop those in your students?
I would say honesty is singularly the most important characteristic. Be honest with yourself, be honest with your science, be honest about what you know and what you don't know. I mean, that will stand you in great stead. I think generosity. Science is a social process. You work with multiple people. I think if you're generous in your ideas and generous with your science, you will also feel the same energy flow back to you in a sense, right? So I would say that is contagious, and a culture of a laboratory can really change if you have a bunch of people who are fundamentally kind and generous.
Right.
Most people who end up in science are already bright. They're already good at what they do. So I don't feel like that's a characteristic I want to worry about too much. I think the honesty, the kindness, the generosity, these qualities can really make or break a group and make or break a group dynamic. I mean, over 30, 40-year journey in science, I feel those values stand the test of time much more than anything else.
Makes sense. Definitely, that's a great message to every researcher and every research group out there. Right now, what do you think is the most exciting thing in neuroscience, and what would you like to pursue in the future?
Gosh, there are so many exciting things in neuroscience. It's difficult to pin down one. I mean, in the last sort of 15 years, there's been a revolution in the techniques and tools that have come in. So the questions are perhaps not that different from what existed before. For example, for someone like me who studies behavior, trying to understand the circuits in the brain that drive specific behaviors have been questions that people have been asking for the last 40 years. But what has happened in the last 15, 20 years is the tools that we have now to ask that same question in much more detail has really expanded. Between optogenetics, chemogenetics, viral approaches that allow you to trace down pathways, you can really start studying the nitty-gritty bolts of how a behavior is produced, right? We'll be able to take on more and more tougher questions now because we've been able to go after the simpler ones with these tools. So, for example, I spend so much time on circuits in the brain that regulate mood-related behavior. But the spectrum of mood-related behavior we and most other people in the world have largely focused on are the negative end. So fear, stress response, despair-like behavior, aggressive behavior. Far less amount of energy relatively was spent on attachment, nurture, care, affiliative behaviors. Are there circuits for empathy? Are there circuits for compassion? Far less was known about those circuits. But now that's not true anymore. In the last sort of 10 years, people have started asking a variety of questions. So I think we're going to see, there's going to be very interesting things emerging from sort of behavioral and systems neuroscience in the next 10 years. Yeah.
That would be great. And we have always seen that no matter what research you are working on, you are very pro and proactive towards putting it out there for common publics. You have done various TED Talks, you have written articles that even, makes a difficult subject like neuroscience easy to understand for general audience. So do you feel it is the responsibility of the scientist to really make the science available and more accessible for general audience?
Yeah, I think so. I personally feel it should become something that as scientists, everyone should be trained in doing this, because That's how we fund our science. Our science is eventually taxpayer funded. And so by definition, it is their taxpayer rupees that are paying for the flexibility of us doing and pursuing questions we want to pursue. So I view it almost as a moral responsibility that we share our science in an accessible manner. Everybody won't do it because they love to do it. Some people just like to communicate science. Some people don't. And it is true that we're all very busy. In fact, I would love it if science funding organizations hold back like the last 5% of the grant, and then right at the end you give that last 5% bonus, saying, "Show me that you actually did something to communicate science." And also, I feel we must publish our science, including negative results, because that's equally important, right? Putting your date. Sometimes you have a hypothesis. The hypothesis is all wrong, and you get lots of negative results, and then you just say, "Oh, I don't want to publish it because it's not a cool story." But
Right.
it's still a story. It's still showing that the null hypothesis was right and your hypothesis was wrong, and putting that information out there is also necessary. And so it prevents somebody else from wasting money redoing the entire thing, because you've stopped that waste of time, effort, money, animals, science, etc., by putting out even a negative result.
So I think many of us have really enjoyed your TED Talks and your talks on various aspects of science, in fact. And one of the sentences that is stuck with me as a woman in science is that science needs more diversity. And you, as a researcher, have been an advocate of equal opportunity for men and women in this field. So we would also like to know something more about this from you.
Yeah, I think we're far away from where we need to go. We might have taken steps forward, but we're far away from equity and true diversity in science. I feel like for a country like India, with the size that we have, the diversity we have, the issues that so many individuals in our country face, that it's as important that as a scientific community, which is eventually one of the intellectual sort of powerhouses of a country, that we look at equity and diversity as an absolute basic build, because it is needed. I mean, for example, sometimes someone comes in with a different background, and because of their background, they look at a problem differently and they solve it differently. And so not only is it a good idea for equity, diversity from the perspective of philosophically supporting that idea, but also because the direct impact on society can be quite different when you have people with different ways of approaching a problem come in. Our society is a complex, diverse society, and it would be good if science also has a similar diversity of people. Our communities, our institutions are not representative of the diversity that exists outside in the real world.
You have been an advocate throughout this journey, and there are various changes that you have brought in the system.
Yeah, I think that at the policy level, there are many wonderful things that have been done by people in government, people within the administrative services. Many progressive ideas have, for example, we have a very progressive maternity leave policy. And certainly as a woman who's a mother, who's a scientist, I personally have benefited from it. And I think it's one of the more progressive policies in the world. And that's really Government of India and administrative services that have put this into place, at least for government institutions. But we don't have a similarly progressive paternity leave policy. And when you don't have that matched, what you're saying is all childcare responsibility is a woman's, which is not the case.
Agreed.
It's a shared responsibility, right? In some ways, it would be nice to see that sort of change happening, and you definitely see it because it is happening, but it's more still at the individual level. So you will wonderfully hear about these individual examples. We need this to be so common that we don't notice it even. But I really feel that in policy, India has many good policies. It's in the implementation that we fall short many times. So that's something that all institutions have to look to see, how do we take policies that exist and implement them well. So I personally don't feel I have done anything more than what a lot of other people do. It's very similar, but I do feel that policy wise, we are actually not on the wrong track. We have many good policies. We just have to start ensuring we implement them well.
Definitely. And even though you don't agree, we thank you for your efforts in bringing this equal opportunity for men and women. I think there are many across India who will thank you for the same. Okay, so this is a very non-scientific question, although it deals with your research topic, which is stress. We would like to know what you do for de-stressing when you're not doing your science.
So I love to go for walks. I love exercise. I love team sports. So I play throw ball. I have a team of girls, women who I play with, and we've been playing for years together. We go for tournaments. Yeah, so there's that. I like to long walks, certainly. I mean, to the point that I've done a crazy for charity 55-kilometer walk, which was pretty insane, but was wonderful. I ended up with blisters, but it was well worth it. I love dance. I've learned dance for many years. I learned Bharatanatyam initially, and then I learned the whole spectrum of Latin and ballroom dances. So I'm happiest sometimes when I just have a good book, a good fiction book. If I have that, it takes me away from any of the sort of standard everyday stresses. You dissolve into some other world. So that's my best way to de-stress, is to read a good book and get distracted from whatever stresses are going on in the background.
So we do have one final question, but we also have a rapid fire round. So would you like to go for the rapid fire first?
Whichever. I'm fine with whichever.
Okay. It's a really short rapid fire round. What's your favorite book?
My favorite book is A Fine Balance by Rohinton Mistry.
Your favorite scientist?
My favorite scientist will be Barbara McClintock.
Your favorite molecule?
Serotonin. That's easy.
Okay.
Easy. Yeah.
Performing experiments at a bench or working on simulations on your computer? What will
Performing
you choose?
experiments at the bench, for sure.
Okay. And if you're given a superpower that helps you answer one question, what would be that one question?
How do you get people to flip out of a severely depressed state into a more appropriately calm state and peaceful state and contented state of mind? If I could do that, then that would be amazing. Yes.
Wow. Okay. Okay, so that brings us to the last question. Any message for our young readers, our viewers, and especially to the women scientists out there?
Yeah, I feel like, sometimes when you're young, you tend to tell yourself that I don't think this is for me, or I don't think I can achieve it, or I won't apply for this because I don't think I'll get it. You say this. I remember this when I was in my BSc just finishing, and I was starting to apply to my PhD programs, and I was choosing the places to apply. And I was making a list, and I was removing places in my own mind, deciding I won't get in. So I was just taking them out. And my father was watching me do this. And my father said, you're not even giving them an opportunity to reject you. You have rejected yourself even before you put in the application, right? So at least apply. If you get rejected, you get rejected, but you have rejected yourself. So, and also sometimes, unfortunately, you don't have people around you who tell you what is wrong with you. Come on, you're capable of doing it. So at that time, don't curtail your dreaming at least. At least dream big. It doesn't matter if every single dream we have necessarily actualizes or not, but certainly you should not put a boundary condition on your dreaming. I wish more young girls were not told what they cannot do. So many young girls are very quickly dismissed or told that you're not capable of doing this, or don't do this, or don't apply, don't even go down that road. So that would be the only message. It's the message I give my daughter, which is that you dream big. Don't worry about which of those dreams comes true, but at least dream big.
Wonderful. So thank you so much for being with us today. It was a wonderful time speaking with you regarding science.
I love chatting with you too.
Yes, thank you so much.